Thank you, Will. So we have a chance to ask some question or two, and then I'll adjourn for a minute and open it up to you guys as well afterwards. So, Maria, would you like to start with a question for Will?
Oh, sure. Thank you. There were so many bravura moments in your presentation. I hardly know where to begin, but maybe I will play devil's advocate in a way, and just ask you about materialism. You said at the end materialism has less of a hold, and I hope that's true. As I think of the afterlife of the motifs, symbols, and myths that you explore, I wondered whether you could say something about how they've migrated into our technological devices. That is, we have laptops that are made by Apple. And I know there's a connection with Turing and all of that, but we have Kindle Fire. And I wonder here whether you could say something about how knowledge may be migrating into machines and devices. So if someone were going to write a sequel to your dissertation 50 years from now, what do you think they might have to, or can you project some of this into the future? Or maybe what I've said is wrong-headed.
No, I definitely have a thought that I'd like to put into this one. Yeah, it's a valuable question. I can do. Okay, so basically, first I want to comment on the concern that maybe materialism in some ways isn't disappearing, and maybe suggest that the psyche is so compensatory, right? So when materialism fades in one way, perhaps it becomes stronger in another, and the same with the ego and many things. So, but then to comment on the way that I think that materialism, to comment on our technologies, and I think what you're asking for. During this presentation, at least once, I used my iPhone to change my Apple phone to change the slide, right? Which means that I didn't touch anything that was physically connected with what we were looking at to make it change. There was no mechanical or material interaction required. It was only a virtual interface. And so more and more we exist in virtual interfaces, which means that our commitment to materiality as the ground of being is being rapidly undermined by the, not so much undermined, it's more so just that it's not even philosophical. It's more so behavioral conditioning, just experience, that we have so many more experiences with reality that are not material. It used to be we had to physically open doors. Now we don't touch them; they open.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we don't type. We can just dictate with the voice.
Exactly, and in fact, I think going way back in technology, music is one of the original demonstrators of what Einstein and Newton both called spooky action at a distance. And what we now know, of course, is that gravity, which drove Newton crazy. He was like, "How the heck does gravity up there? And how does the sun influence us here? They're not touching." And the Newtonian paradigm is all about mechanical touching. And of course, now we understand that it's ripples in space-time and that it's waves, it's field. That just like Pythagoras said, there is a harmony of the spheres, and all the planets are in a relationship with each other, defined by their frequencies and waves, whether they're gravitational or electromagnetic. So I think our so there's the virtuality of our technologies, and then there's also, this is a big one, every technology that's important to us, like my iPhone or my Apple phone, and by the way, just to get materialistic on the other side, Apple has more capital, more money in the bank than any other company in the world. Just money, just cash, which is kind of interesting for the Apple to me, materialistically. But the Apple phone has zero material value. It's barely a paperweight, but it's probably the most valuable tool I got right now. It's the ninja tool. So. And it exists because, and it works by floating on a sea of waves, whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's cell phone, whether it's satellite. Every communication, whether it's down a wire or from a phone, wirelessly, all the communications are through waves. So you got Hermes the messenger with the caduceal staff, which is that wave staff, and I'm convinced that waves are always the connector. They're always the messenger. Our eyes, we see because light waves come into our eyes. We hear because sound waves come into our ear. And if we get really sophisticated, our other senses are hugely influenced and dependent on frequencies as well. But it's much more obvious with sight sound. So I think I've answered your question mostly, well, actually, let me just real quick jump 50 years in the future and think about how crazy some technologies can get. Let's imagine, and I've got friends, Devin here too has some friends that are working on virtual reality stuff. You've got the Magic Leap, incredible. You projects images into your eye that you can see things here that aren't even here, but it makes it look like it's here, and you can touch them, and basically they're whole layers. You can add layers of reality that are not based on materiality at all, and I think in 50 years those layers of reality are going to be just about as influential and as present and important to us as the physical world. Look at how important email is to us compared to the physical world. I anticipate that will happen more and more, and that we will condition children and adults more and more and more to be less and less committed to reductive materialism.
Great. Thank you. That was terrific.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Maria. Kieran, would you like to?
Yeah. I noticed 6 questions. I'm going to prioritize them.
Okay. Here comes a hard one. I can feel it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, one of them, first of all, let me say what an intellectual feat it is to survey that amount of knowledge and to pull out the underlying pattern there across such a vast span of history and different traditions. Really incredible.
Thank you.
And it's probably even more of a feat to present on that in 30 minutes. So my background is young. I'm interested in deep structures, I guess, and this question won't be wholly new to you because I put it in my written comments. I'm curious as to what is the underlying structure here. You call it a meta-narrative, okay? Mm-hmm. So if it's a meta-narrative, what is the underlying form mechanism? That's the first part.
Okay.
And I think I'm thinking particularly, is it something that's metaphysical, ontological? Mm-hmm. Is there some deep structure in the nature of things, or is it, as you sometimes appear to imply, part of a narrative and therefore epistemological, psychological? So that would be the first thing, if you just hold that.
Okay, sure.
And then the second part is, if that's the formal cause part, in Aristotelian terms, I'm also interested in the final cause part. Why? Okay, so why, and again, you mentioned this in that final slide, but I wonder specifically if there's a purpose of the fall into alienation, estrangement, matter, egoic individualism, and that fall is not wholly negative, because the union that you rightly exalt kind of depends on the individualism that precedes that. So, how do you respond to the how and the what?
Okay, great. Those are great questions. You pushed me to the limit of where I limited my dissertation, where I realized I need to, I could try and talk about the archetypal pattern. That's what I think is, I do, truth be told, think it's more universal than I focused in the dissertation. The dissertation, I felt like I needed to narrow it to, I found that narrowing it to these 3 Western traditions was enabled me to package it nicely and tight, but I think that the pattern can be found, for example, the Buddha kind of first loses his innocence sitting under a rose apple tree, and then he achieves enlightenment sitting beneath the fig tree. And just to give you an image, the rose apple is a stone fruit, and the fig is, one, it's a flower, and 2, it's empty in the center. And so I think that, this is just a Buddhist narrative, where I think it's the same meta-narrative, where you have this sense of isolation, and of course you see the Atman in this image, right? Or the ego and the monad. And Tarnas likes to draw that circled point too. So I think you go from this isolation, it's like almost an egg, a cosmic egg, but then when you go from this idea of an intrinsically valuable thing, well, for the Buddha, it's to go to Paticca Samuppada. Everything is what it is with everything else, this dependent co-arising. So I think that it's more universal, but I focused on it in this dissertation just to the Western thing. And I tried to go here because I think it's convincing that it's a Western narrative, and I think that that's a pretty big deal on its own, you know, just to like realize that, oh, this, because whenever you try and talk about something universal or objective, there are all kinds of pushbacks. And so I want this thing to set and land on people just as like us, you know, this is our, you know, Western meta narrative. It's there, whether it's objective or not, that's a secondary question, but crucial secondary question, or at least, and maybe not, maybe it's actually primary. So I think that, and to come back to that in a second, but to jump into your second question, the value of this, I could flip this over, you know, and do it that way, but this book's a disaster. So basically, I think it's like the caduceal staff, you know, the ups and downs are actually part of the moving forward. So I completely believe that part of the value of recognizing a meta-narrative is to recognize that what's seen as bad is not bad. What's seen as bad is actually, the fall is actually the beginning of a meta-narrative. It's like saying at the beginning of a movie where something bad happens, it's a disaster, when at the end it's like, that's what the movie's all about. You know, so I think that it's not bad, it's not a bad fall. And another thing I know that you'd probably like to hear me comment on is that the entry into egoism and into the self, the self identity, which is crucial in both of these stories and the development of knowledge. This is a complication that I really was having a hard time dealing with in the dissertation, which is that I don't see materialism as a problem. I don't see atomism as egoism as a problem. I see when you take one side of a two-sided metaphor and make that one side everything. So you got egoism and altruism, to say it simply, or something like that. If you just stick on egoism, it's a problem. If you leave out the self and go to altruism, it's a problem. To me, meta-narratives and looking at process, I love Hegel's philosophy. When you look at a process, you can normally take away the problem and see the problem as simply part of a process and see it as playing a big part in a major whole. And ultimately, I believe in the photon. I believe in the Grail stone, which is a synthesis of particle and wave, of self and the altruistic self. To me, they're both crucial. They both must be combined. And as soon as the pendulum swings to either side too far, you've missed it. So I love that moment in the Egyptian Amduat when the lunar and solar eye are balanced and they have the same size.
Can I jump in just with a little bit more on the why? Because I'm wondering whether there's an evolution here, or whether it's just a recurring pattern that actually doesn't really lead anywhere. So,
I think that this is the... my answer to that is not very academic, in a sense, you know, because it's beyond where I push this academically. This is, you know, on a personal level, ultimately what I believe, not something I can necessarily defend, is that this is also the ascetics path. This is the mystical path. This is the path to go from the isolated self to the universal self. I believe this is the path to enlightenment, in a sense, in an abstract way. This to me is actually what I would say. I tried to pull out the Buddhist path as a common meta-narrative with this. So to me, it's a recurring pattern, but it's really importantly the pattern of the liberation from isolation of the individual, which is infinitely and always important to spiritual and soulful humans, and I think humans are inevitably and always soulful, so this is crucial to our souls to see that we're not isolated, otherwise we'll be in serious anxiety.
I think it's a wise move. You present the data, offer an interpretation, but then leave the conclusion open. And I think within the limits of dissertation, that's, I'm you know, my bias is to look for deep structures.
And that was really great to work with you on them.
Glad that you shared something of your own perspective, even if it's beyond the limits of it.
You know, it's really that's been a challenge, a big challenge, but a really good challenge for me. That was, to say it real simply, Walter Odeinik sat me down and was like, you know, you need to anchor your work a little more, and it was like a serious conversation, and I've been channeling some Walter in this one, that's for sure.
Well, you can't do better than that. So just real quickly, in the little bit of time we have left, you kind of skipped over the part of the Grail stone narrative and how you get that into your thesis. You want to just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah.
Relation? How does the Grail and the stone get into the argument?
Absolutely. So the Grail, first I'm looking at the Holy Grail. When I was in the alchemy and I think the Holy Grail class or the Arthurian class at the same time, I was thinking about how there was this super emphasis on the Philosopher's Stone as like a word for the ultimate achievement, and then like now there's like this switch towards the Holy Grail as this ultimate achievement, and then there I saw the meta narrative even there, right, culturally, in this emphasis on the stone to the emphasis on the Grail. And I just started seeing in the Arthurian class, like I've never seen, the Holy Grail is the Holy Grail of Holy Grails. It's the ultimate object to be attained, is the ultimate symbol of the ultimate pursuit. And so it became a symbol of enlightenment for me. And so I could do some nice work to connect how important it is to the Abrahamic tradition. But to be honest, I think that would be a little bit of a disservice to how big I think the Grail myths really are. I mean, the Christian stuff's there, the classical stuff's there, tons of stuff's there. And so there are some connections to the Christian myth, but it's, I think, far beyond that. So to me, I think Wolfram's Grail Stone is really nice because there you have an actual image of a stone that has this deep relationship with fluids, with water. You know, he has the stone, and there's this scene where the stone is there, and then water starts filling the basin and rivers or something like that.
It's for the baptism of
the
fear.
Baptism of fear fits, right.
Holds the cup towards the stone, and the water flows from it.
And so that to me, it's almost even hard to say more because it's all just right there. You know, there is the Grail Stone. You know, I like the image. There's some other nice synthesis. Moses, of course, taps on the stone 3 times, and then water comes out. And I like this one's for Maria. That story. I think it's Tom Thumb. I don't remember what story it is, but there's this giant that a guy's got a trick, and he tricks the giant into thinking he can squeeze fluid from a stone. And really, it's just cheese that he's squeezing. You know, there's even a Mickey Mouse version of this. But to me, that's a nice little. There are lots of these nice little catches of the Grail and the stone, or the fluid. And let me just end with this one. Here is this candle I lit in the beginning, right? And so one nice little twist is that fruits appear solid from the outside. The apple is this very hard fruit, but apple juice is the most popular fruit juice in the world. And so it's tricky because on the surface, just like atoms, we think of them as solid. But when we get deep into them, we realize that they're filled with juice. Just like humans, you know, we project solid at ourselves, but we're like 99% of our molecules are water. Around 70% of our mass is water. And so there's a lot of examples where the surface suggests material and particulation, but deeper shows the fluids and the waves.
Great, thanks, Will.
Thanks.
Naturally, I'd like that scene in Wolfram to be brought forward a little bit more because it so dramatically illustrates your thesis.
One more I just want to mention too, because to me it's a big one, and it's similar to that one, is when Jason and the Argonauts, they finally get to the place where the golden apples are. And by the way, Prometheus sends Heracles to get the golden apples. And when he's there, he's thirsty as can be, and he knocks on this rock, and water starts coming from the rock, just like the story of Moses. And so the Argonauts show up coming from a desert, carrying their boat. It's that much of a dry situation. This is the ultimate wasteland for me. And then when they get there, they're shown the water that Hercules found, and the whole place. The tree dies and then is revived. And so there you have another water and rock symbol.
Right.
And a wasteland redemption, because to me, the wasteland is the reductive. That's too simple, sorry. I'm reducing. But to me, a big part of the wasteland is that cosmology of reductive atomistic materialism, whether it's articulated philosophically or simply demonstrated symbolically as a wasteland.
Well, thank you, Will. And in the interest of time, Maria, I'm going to hang up on that phone and call you back briefly on my cell phone, and we'll chat for a second with Kieran as well.
Yeah, okay, great.
And during that time, you're invited to respond to questions from the audience.
I got questions.
He's gonna be.
I've got them written out here. I'm
We'll
ready.
call back briefly.
And you want me to hang up now, right?
Yes.
Thanks,
yes.
Maria. I'll
Okay,
send you email
will do.
later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So I guess
Now the real grilling starts, huh?
Do you have one? You want to go
I
first?
do this all the time.
I know, you do it all the time.
But
so
I
I'll
really
do
want
this.
you to ask one. So, which I don't care.
Okay, so I haven't read your whole dissertation, as you know, but
Slacker. It's
I
only
know,
like 600
such
pages.
a slacker. I don't have anything of my own to read right now. So, but in this, you write in the last paragraph, fluids and waves are capable of union and harmony. And then further down, the initial commitment to a materially grounded cosmology that is later enhanced, if not healed, by theoretical waves and symbolic elixirs. So what I'm wondering is, so as we move, you showed that image on the screen of, you know, the microwaves and the, and moving X-rays and iPhones. More and more and more of our existence is being connected through waves. So are we to then interpret from what you've studied and explored that we're moving into a more spiritually and connected existence?
I think actually that egoism, the idea of isolating the ego, is actually dependent on a set of metaphors that are reinforced by this old materialistic cosmology, and that as we lose the materialistic cosmology of atomism that reinforces the vision of the ego as isolated, then the whole egoistic philosophy finds far less foundation. And as the ego finds less foundation, it's harder for it to sustain itself as the front and center of so many things. And so I think you were asking about leading into a spiritual situation, and I first want to comment on how I think that we are leading away from the ultimate despiritualizer, which is self-obsession, selfishness and self-aggrandizement and stuff like that. So I do think, and I also believe that I think so that makes people more primed for a more spiritual way of being, one. The other thing is, I think, as we start to see more union and we can understand that we are unified and not just like in this, oh, we're one with the universe kind of thing, but actually conceptualize how we, in fact, mathematically, scientifically are not distinctly and infinitely isolated. I think that's another thing that makes the ground richer for a more spiritual relationship with reality. And so I think that these two... Yeah. So these two foundations, these two shifts in foundations, I think are priming us for a much more spiritually and altruistically driven reality. Now we could talk about the other trends that are pushing the other direction, but those are from other things, and you have the big fight back for the ego with the iPhone and the MySpace and all that shit. But,
well, the follow-up question to that is just about if wave theory is about the ability to unify and merge particles. I think about that, and yet how much our movement toward using more and more wave technology creates a lot less community in certain ways and connection. And so I'm wondering, okay, so how do you put those together? Like, how do you relate to what's happening to the dinner table?
So that's a great question, and I think Devin might ask something similar. So
I mean, that's
I want to hear. No, but I want you to ask.
No, yeah, I think that I don't know. It's hard for me to get on board with a romantic notion of those technologies being liberating and enlightening, and so on. But I might focus. I don't know. I think they are, and they aren't, and maybe it's just another chapter of something that is perpetual and isn't really necessarily evolution to enlightenment.
Right.
I don't know. So yeah, I would say that's a rough ground of the subject. I think is what is union with those technologies and what is not. I mean, they seem to be responsible for a lot of illness and
right
and things that I don't know. I think those are they get to be trickier and trickier words when you really think about what they mean and what's really going on.
So what Devin was asking and Britta too is basically like, I'm talking about how waves enable metaphysical union, but like in a way, as much as these phones connect us more, they also make us, in a sense, more isolated. Right?
I had that as one of my questions.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And so did Maria too. Maria also, and that is absolutely true, and that's where I think scientifically, philosophically, there's this shift. This shift can happen, but definitely socially, experientially, there's like. It's just compensatory circumambulation of collective psyche in a sense, right? It's like where we become increasingly connected in this way. Lo and behold, the whack-a-mole pops up over here where we become less connected in this other way. And so I definitely think it's not like we've reached this big breakthrough and now everything's going to be good. It's like definitely new sides. And so I wanted to bounce into, too, just who Frankenstein is, right? The Frankenstein, subtitled The Modern Day Prometheus, is the original ultimate demonstration of technology gone bad, gone too far, and that I think certainly is a big threat. And I like this one story, and this is a story I literally wish I could tell this to every scientist in the world, especially the researchers, and that is that when Prometheus was finally freed, Zeus asked him to wear a ring. The chink of his chain is a ring. And this ring, that all of the initiates into the Promethean mysteries of the Kabiroi, they all wore this ring. And the ring was a symbol of their restraint as scientists and inventors. To recognize, because it's to remember, just like Prometheus was restrained. Okay, Mr. Technology, I'm going to let you free. But you better remember restraint, or you're going to bring down the world again like you did last time. Because he is the ultimate revolutionizer. So the point is that I believe in unchaining Prometheus. But just like the Zen idea of unleashing a tamed mind, I do think we got to remember restraint. We got to remember the risks of Frankenstein's, and as much as we might like to be all happy about all these union and the social revolutions with Facebook and all that stuff, there's definitely some threats on the other side where it's further isolating. I do all my connection with people from inside my room by myself.
Yeah.
Waves and material.
When I was outside with Lance, I felt a couple of drops of rain, which would be very appropriate.
That'd be
And I
great.
said, if it started to hailstone, right?
Yeah,
It feels like it. Well, congratulations,
Thank
Dr. Linn. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll look forward to continued conversations.
Thank you.
And
Wow.
this is for you, and you need to unwrap that so I can sign it.
Okay.
And we neglected to do that.
Very well
Thank
done.
you, Kieran.
Excellent piece of work.
Oh man,
And they've got a great presentation.
thank you.
Sorry about the questions.
Oh yeah, get it.
You got the camera.
Can I,
Come on,
Yes!
for God's sake,
Yeah.
yeah. We need a hologram of Maria down there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, turn here.
Where's her wave particles?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool.